We'll do our transfer portal winners and losers so far. So the transfer portal is not over. Obviously, we just got done talking about teams that are going after certain players that could come to the school. So we're not talking about players added yet. Right now, we are talking about we're talking about players who have been lost from their team, who have departed, and we're looking at if the team is a winner or a loser based on that. Now, Zach and I have put together two winners. We have a neutral, and then we have three losers in the Big Ten. We're not trying to be overly negative. We're just looking at it and saying this is what we think. So, Zach, should we start with positivity? Should we start with the winners?
Yeah, let's positivity.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Everybody was talking about it in the chat earlier, so let's just start with it. I know Illinois lost Josh McCray, but they held on to Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier said no to Tennessee. I think that's a huge thing for them. Tennessee fans were very confident they were going to get Luke Altmaier. I'm calling Illinois a winner. I'm also calling Illinois a winner because my guy Sonny Verma pointed it out. Illinois used to have the MAC coming after their roster. Now they've got the SEC coming after their roster and coming after their recruits. Now, they did lose Josh McCray and they did lose their recruit Victor Singleton. However, I think that speaks volumes about where this Illinois program is at. I think it speaks to Brett Bielema's coaching, and I think it speaks to the future of this Illinois team. So I know in the immediate, it does stink to lose Josh McCray, but you don't lose Luke Altmaier. You have running back depth behind Josh McCray. So I think that's a good situation. Overall, I would call Illinois a winner in this situation. Agree or disagree, Zach?
Agree. Absolutely agree. Can we just point out that Illinois lost Josh McCray to Georgia? Like the
Yeah.
running, like one of the premier running back schools. And so if you're gonna lose someone, they didn't lose one of their better running backs to, like, to your point, to UMass. They lost him to an SEC power and a national championship favorite. Like,
Right.
good for them. Like, good for Georgia and kind of good for Illinois. Like, it stinks that they lost him, but it's like, I think to your point, Illinois has raised its profile. And not only that, but their trigger man, their captain, he believes in Illinois so much that he is not going to be tempted by more money, by maybe a better offer down in an SEC land.
Well, not only that, but he's not going to be tempted by the SEC. I talked about it when I did the show. Like, the Tennessee is used to using the leverage of like come play in the SEC, right? Like better
Yep.
competition, going to get you better ready for the NFL, yada yada yada, all that stupid stuff that they say. And it's like not now. Like I was telling people in that video, I was like, this is why you root for your conference. This is why you want your conference to be good because I realize Illinois fans probably think Ohio State and Michigan winning the national championship does nothing for you in the moment, but later on, when the SEC starts trying to make the play of come to the SEC where real football is played, you're like, get out of here. You, your best team in the conference
Yeah.
just lost in the first round of Notre Dame, who hasn't won a major bowl game in 20 plus years. They just lost to Notre Dame, and you're and the national championship champion just spanked one of your teams in their first game and then beat the other team by two scores. So, like this it doesn't really hold up. Now, does the SEC have their argument for a deeper, more depth in the conference? Sure, but that's not going to win anybody over. Like nobody's going to the SEC because they have more depth, right? The,
Mm-hmm.
the Big Ten tried to make this argument for years, and it was always shot down. The same thing's going to happen with the SEC. If the SEC doesn't get back to winning, national championships, they're going to say, "Oh, look at our depth." And it's like, nobody cares. Nobody cares if your second string defensive tackle is good or not to win a national championship. Is your goal to go 9-3 or is your goal to win a national championship? I think it's to win a national championship.
There is an irony that you just used the second string defensive tackle analogy when we were just saying that Ohio State really needs a second string defensive tackle. But
Yeah, but I mean, at the end
anyway,
of the day, is the second string defensive tackle for Ohio State going to be the difference between going 12-0 and 8-4?
no,
No.
no, I'm just sorry. I'm just picking on you.
No, but I know what you're saying. It is
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I think it is a good reminder that Illinois it's not been a blip, right? This is not a, they're not a blip, and folks in the chat may maybe disagree with this, but as long as Bielema is there, this program is ascending, and I'm excited to see what happens. And I think, again, Luke Altmaier staying is a big deal.
It is. It's a huge deal. John says Illinois is a joke. Nobody cares about their program, and nobody will. Harsh words from John. John, very harsh of you. I will say, if you feel that way, you are more than inclined to feel that way. However, this show does not feel that way, so we cannot share that sentiment with you, John. So, congratulations to your feelings if you feel that way, but we cannot agree with that sentiment. We apologize. Actually, I don't apologize. No.
I'm just gonna say, John, I appreciate you're in the chat. I'm just gonna say the first folks that ever responded to me as a podcaster were Illinois fans. They care about their program. And that was when Bert first started. And like they care, and they care even more now. So
I truthfully care for every program in the Big Ten. Now, I will stay true to my fandom, and I will not like my rivals, but I think I will be fair to them. I don't think me rooting against them or doesn't really affects the podcast, because I can still find a way to be fair. But that's just me. All right, next winner, Zach. Who is our other winner that we have?
Goodness, we're gonna be homers. But like, if you're gonna go with who they didn't lose, like Ohio State didn't lose anybody. They lost their backup long snapper. That's pretty good.
And their punter, like third string punter.
And by the way, they had a spring game and nobody left. Nobody got poached from their spring
That's
game.
what I was going to say. If people come in here and say like, oh, well, there were other Big Ten teams that didn't lose any scholarship players too. Okay, I get that. But what has been the discussion with the transfer portal over the past couple of years? It's that teams can't remain elite because they can't keep their depth and they can't keep their talent because they go into the transfer portal. Ohio State just put all of their depth and all of their talent on display for 2 hours on the television, which is what everybody said you can't do. And then you have everybody saying, well, this is going to be a huge transfer portal. Joel Klatt said it because everybody can get paid right before the house settlement comes down. Meanwhile, Ohio State didn't lose anybody. So, yes, maybe another team didn't lose anybody in the transfer portal, any scholarship players. But I think if you're looking at it within the context, it is an impressive thing that Ohio State did not lose a single scholarship player in the transfer portal, with how much talent they have in their depth, with how they put on a spring game, and with this discussion about how much teams need to keep their depth and how that can really be a hindrance on teams being able to remain elite or not. So we won't spend too much time on it, but I do think that's a huge thing. Do you have any other thoughts on Ohio State before we move on, Zach?
Well, I think one position group in particular is wide receiver, right? Like they could have lost Mylan Graham after that spring game.
Right.
Because he's not going, like, he might be wide receiver 3, maybe, or wide receiver 3 or 4. I think my guess is he's 4 because of Ennis and Tate. Maybe he's even 5 with Quincy Porter. We're not sure. But he's going to be a sophomore next year. And you're like, oh, like he's a potential transfer risk. But he's like, I'm going to stick around to be developed by the best wide receiver coach in college football. So,
right. And Mish, you are exactly correct. Penn State didn't lose any starters. I'm not saying that Penn State's not a winner. I'm just saying, like, for what I said, the reasons I said, I think Ohio State stands out a little bit more in that way. Penn State, though, they still did a really good job keeping a hold of their starters. Doesn't mean they're definitely not a loser in our book. We don't have them down as a loser by any means. Yeah. So, but I think, like I said, I tried to explain. To me, Ohio State stood out in another way that was a little bit more. So, neutral. UCLA, Zach, what are your thoughts? Winner, loser? They lose Joey Aguilar. I know we're not really talking about players they added as much, but this one is directly a reflect of the player that they added. So I feel like there needs to be at least a little bit of a conversation here. We talked about, who won the trade, that kind of stuff. Are you neutral on UCLA? You think they're a winner? Think they're a loser? What are your thoughts?
It's hard. I think neutral is probably the right call. Like they did lose other players. Like they lost TJ Harden, Isaiah Patterson. Joshua Swift. So they've lost some guys. I don't know how crucial they are, but they've lost some guys. I think it really depends on how you view Nico. And like, because
As an upgrade or not, you mean?
yeah, and I know we're not talking about players that they added, but to your point, the Joey Aguilar loss is directly tied to Nico coming in. And so you almost have to weigh it. And so I just think it's too hard to tell. I don't know if they won or lost yet. I think we can only tell with their particular situation. I think you can only tell in 6 months.
For sure. For sure. All right, let's get to the losers, Zach. First one, I'll let you take this one over. Maryland.
I'm sorry, Larry. I'm sorry.
Larry would agree with us, I think.
I think so too, but I'm still sorry. Yeah, you can't lose as many players as you did. And again, we talked about it with Illinois losing guys to big name teams. But I think the difficulty is Illinois lost one guy to Georgia, and they lost one recruit to SEC land. Maryland lost a lot, man. Like Caleb Wheatland's going to Auburn, Levon Johnson's going to Texas, Kellen Wyatt's going to Indiana. And Therese Davis is going to Ole Miss. They lost several offensive linemen. And I think the big thing, the smoke coming out of the program is before the transfer portal, I think they were excited that they might have a team that could really compete this year. And all the momentum has kind of been sucked out with that. So I just think whatever momentum you had, especially the buzz around Malik Washington at quarterback, I just think all that goes out the window, especially because they lost so many offensive linemen. I think they lost 3 offensive linemen in the portal so far.
Yeah, which losing offensive line depth for them, a major issue. And on the show, Larry commented just how much, they needed to keep as well. So, yeah, they lost a number of guys in here. Therese Davis, and then 2 linebackers, Caleb Wheaton and Kellen Wyatt. Wyatt will be a good addition there for Indiana. I don't think he'll be a star player or anything like that, but he'll be a good addition and definitely help them in some ways. So they didn't. I don't know. I don't want to say that, but yeah, I mean they lost a number of guys who entered into the portal. Therese Davis, defensive lineman, Levon Johnson, Javen James, offensive tackle. They did lose a quarterback named Robert Long. I apologize. I did not remember that Robert Long left. But yeah, a lot of trenches, and we've said it time and time again. This is what Maryland needs: is they need more trenches. So
yep, yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah. All right. Next loser I have is Michigan State. They lost a number of guys in this cycle that, I mean, I have no idea if they were going to be star players for them or not, but they've just lost a number of guys in the spring transfer portal cycle. Anthony Jones was an edge that they lost. Big name was Dylan Tatum, cornerback that they lost. That's not one you want to lose. And then 2 freshmen one freshman wide receiver. No, two. Sorry, Austin Clay and Jalen Brown. I mean, you don't want to lose freshmen that quick. I kind of question what's going on there a little bit, but yeah, Michigan State losing those guys, it's not a great situation. We'll see what Jonathan Smith can do. Maybe they lost him for a reason. We just don't know, but it doesn't seem like a good situation. So, Zach, you want to address the Purdue there, because you had some thoughts on Purdue before we came on.
Yeah, I think it's hard to figure out Purdue because I think, yes, they lost a lot, but they've also gotten a lot. And again, we're only judging based on who they lost. But at this point, I feel like for Purdue, you just got to figure out who you are and who I think Philip actually has the best comment here. Purdue rebuild could take a long time. And so when you're as desperate as Purdue and you're trading bodies, it's kind of like I think they're a loser because of the reality that they're Purdue right now. They're where they're at. I think they're trying to make their team the best they can. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
this is the best comment of the night for
Hey,
sure.
just leave that one up there. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Philip, comment of the day there. He said loser category: SEC, ACC, NCAA, ESPN, pollsters. You're exactly right. So, yeah, they did lose. It looks like 5 guys. On three has. There might be more on 24/7, but typically on three has the main guys that are lost. They lost an offensive lineman, a defensive lineman, and a couple wide receivers, or 4 guys. I apologize, but they did add an offensive tackle. We'll have more on that later. And yeah, Mish losing Max Clare is terrible. That was in the winter window though. We're just talking spring for now.
yep, yep.
But yeah, that and Dylan Thieneman, that kills. That hurts.
Yeah, if we were doing the spring or the winter portal, Purdue absolutely lost.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, with
100%.
spring, they have not lost the impact players that they lost in the winter for sure.
Troy loved the loss of Claire though. Peak the Ohio State logo there. He loved it. All right, Zach, last one, and then we'll be done here. And I hesitate to even mention this team because I do feel like
Don't
we're kind of
hesitate. Don't
well, I
hesitate.
feel like we're kind of kicking them when they're down. And I did pick them to beat Alabama in our upset draft, and that is looking worse and worse by the day. That's okay. I will survive. But Wisconsin, I don't know if Tanner Kozel and Mark Hamper were actually like the biggest losses in the world. I mean, Tanner Kozel went back into the portal and he was still rated really high. The thought coming out of that was that he wasn't good enough to play for Wisconsin. I don't know if that's the case. I tend to think Tanner Koziel was probably good enough to play for Wisconsin, but maybe not. I mean, there were Wisconsin insiders saying like, "Oh, he's going to go back to the MAC." Well, he went to Houston. I mean, it's not like SEC or Big Ten football, but it's still Big 12. Like that's not the MAC, you know. So I mean, more than anything here, it's like it's a lose-lose situation because you lose Mark Hamper and Tanner Kozel, and it's like, okay, you lost them. Like if you lost them because they weren't as good as the other guys in the room, it's like, what is your talent evaluation? Because that's just a
Mhm.
complete miss and a complete waste of your time that you sent people out to go watch these guys and to bring them in and spend training staff and everything on them, and they weren't good enough. Or if they just were not culture guys, or they left because they weren't in on everything that was going on, like that's like just as bad. So I don't know. Like I
Yeah.
fail to see a positive here for Tanner Kozel and Mark Hamper. I do think the wide receiver room is better than maybe some people give him credit for. So I kind of believe in that a little bit more with Mark Hamper, Trey Kikamunga, Kikamunga, Trey
Trick.
Trek K, him and Jaden Ballard. I think those guys are going to be legit for Wisconsin this season, and Vinny Anthony as well. I think those guys are going to be
Mhm.
legit for him this season, but I don't know. The Tanner Kozel situation is just it's a weird one to me, and it leads me to believe they're probably losers in this situation.
Yeah, it's Trek Kekahuna.
Kakahuna. I wanted to put an M in there. No H.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kekahuna.
Listen, I
Um,
just learned how to say Iamaliava. Okay, give me some time.
you've done excellently tonight on your
Yes, thank you,
pronunciations. I
thank you.
give you a lot of
Trek
props for
K,
that.
as he will be known from
Trek
a
K.
good amount of time here.
Um,
Your thoughts on Wisconsin, Zach?
dude, I Luke Fickle might be my new Mike Loxley, man, which I hate because I love Fickle, but at some point, like what you said was exactly what I thought when just as I was thinking about this, is I'm like, how did Fickle miss so bad on his transfer guys? And I know it wasn't all of them, but like they were excited about Kozel. They were excited about Hamper. And it just,
I mean, there were Wisconsin fans saying he was the best tight end in the Big Ten next year.
well, apparently their talent evaluation's off too.
But like, also, don't you think like in your room too? Like, shouldn't you have a good enough talent evaluation of the guys in your room as well? Like,
Yeah. I
you are you just expecting less of them as well. I don't know. Like to me, I was hoping for, and maybe there was an issue here with bringing in Jeff Grimes, and maybe Jeff Grimes didn't know the town evaluation. Like I'm willing to hear that argument if a Wisconsin fan is willing to make it. But if I'm a Wisconsin fan, like there's been a lot of excuses over the time there made for Luke Fickell, not made by Luke Fickell. I'm not saying Luke Fickell's doing that. I'm saying
No.
like if you're a Wisconsin fan, you kind of got to continue to try and make excuses to make you feel better about Luke Fickell. At some point, he might just not be the guy. And that stinks for Wisconsin fans if that's the case, because you moved on from Paul Chryst and everything else for him. But if he's just not the guy, he's just not the guy. Like it is what it is, and you're gonna have to move on from him. If they go 3-9 this season, I know they just gave him an extension, but they're gonna have to move on from him.
It's over. Yeah. And I think that the sad thing is, I think you've heard me say this, and I know other people have too. Like at some point, you are who you are until you prove otherwise. Right?
Yeah.
Luke Fickell to me, I think he can coach, but I remember vividly, and it was one game, but I remember vividly the Cincinnati game against Alabama in the playoff, where it just felt like they played not to lose the entire game. It's like, I just don't want to get blown out. And to me, that was like, man, I'm not sure you're ever going to rise to the occasion.
Right.
And I kind of feel that way right now with Wisconsin, where I just don't have the confidence that he's coming into this season that he thinks that he can win. And that's an overstatement. I'm realizing that's an overstatement based on what we're talking about, but I'm like, man, with every decision you make here in the off season and every recruit you bring in, when you have been this mediocre to bad over the past 2 years, then everything's going to get microanalyzed. But all the microanalysis is this is not good.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not impressed with his in-game coaching right now. Not impressed by his talent evaluation, not impressed by his recruiting, not impressed by what he's doing in the transfer portal. Like it's not just a loss for the spring window. It's a loss as you look at the program and you're like, you guys feel lifeless right now.
Mish makes a good point. It says Wisconsin played Penn State and Oregon tough. They definitely have potential. And I would agree with you, Mish. I just haven't seen it consistently. Like they played Oregon tough and then got blown out by Nebraska.
Yeah.
Like and I know that was after what's his name was fired. The offensive coordinator Phil Longo was fired, so that does affect things. But we've also seen teams before lose a coach or a coordinator, and like they play with even more enthusiasm afterward. Right?
Yeah.
Nebraska last year. Nebraska, they didn't fire him. He just got demoted. Marcus Satterfield. They bring in Dana Altman. I felt like that offense had new life. That offense felt like something new, and they were on a losing streak when that happened.
Yeah.
You fire Phil Longo, and somebody else takes over for him, and it feels like there's just not as much juice. Like you're building off a great game against Oregon, but it doesn't feel like they're seeing it that way. It felt like they were seeing it as, well, we lost to Oregon. Season's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so any other thoughts?
Well, I'm just going to say, because I appreciate that thought by Mish, but who else did we say that for all the time? Scott Frost. And I hate to go down that road, but everybody, what did people say about 2021? Nebraska's the best 3-9 team in the country because they would play teams close. And you're like, they're almost there. This is my wake-up call to Wisconsin fans. If that's how if they start with a close loss to Alabama and then a loss after that to Maryland, and you're saying that, but we almost beat Bama, don't be fooled. It's over. Like it's over. Like you can't count. If you want to be where you want to be, You cannot count close win or close losses. I don't care if they're Alabama. I don't care if they're Penn State. I don't care if they're Oregon.
Well, you can count them in year one, right?
Yeah, not in
And
year
year one when
two.
you're building things, you can count them then. Year
Yeah.
two, you can count them if you come out and play with your hair on fire and do really well the next week. I don't think you can count them if you don't play well the next week.
Right. They're not a mulligan anymore.
Right.
Like you can, yeah. That I think I appreciate it. You can lose close and still like, and then win the games you're supposed to and win some coin flips. But if you're not doing, if all you're doing is losing close and then losing the teams that you should beat, like what are we doing? Like Wisconsin just broke their bowl game streak. Like that's the worst season like that Wisconsin's had in what 30 years?
Yeah, about 30 years. I don't hear Wisconsin fans talking about that very much. I would have thought they'd be railing Luke Fickell for that.
Yeah.
But they don't go on about that as much as I thought they would.